Behind me is a portrait painted in 1862 of Andrew Jackson. He was the Major General commanding the American forces in the Battle of New Orleans. As a result of his stunning victory for the United States in this battle, he was elected the 7th President of the United States, and is someone still very much revered here in St. Bernard and in New Orleans and throughout the region. The Battle of New Orleans is very important because the Battle of New Orleans redefined the American identity. Prior to the Battle of New Orleans, the only people who had fought as Americans for the United States of America were Anglo-American people who lived along the east coast of what is today the United States. During the Battle of New Orleans, Creole, French, and Spanish colonists, free Africans, free people of color, slaves, people from Saint-Domingue, which is today Haiti, people from Spain, Italy, all over Western Europe, came together under the command of General Andrew Jackson to repulse the British invasion of Louisiana. And that invasion was very important because Great Britain knew that whoever controlled New Orleans controlled access to the Mississippi Valley. So that the American victory in the Battle of New Orleans ensured America's westward expansion and guaranteed her destiny as a global titan in terms of our economy and our position in the world. So the Battle of New Orleans, in large measure, shaped the destiny of the United States.
We're at the Chalmette Battlefield, and this is the commemoration of the War of 1812's ending on January 8, 1815. We have numerous folk life demonstrators, people, blacksmiths, people dyeing clothing, fire starters, people cooking. We have different regiments from representing the Kentuckians and the Tennesseans, even a French regiment that helped us during that time.
We represent U.S. regulars, so we carry the U.S. 1795 musket, which is pretty much a copy of the French Charleville musket. This is a weapon, a smoothbore flintlock musket that could be loaded and fired 3 times to 4 times in a minute by a good soldier. We will be doing firing demonstrations throughout the day, of course firing blanks, but to give people a sense of what it was like when troops were on the line firing at the British as they marched across the field. We are the 7th Regiment of United States Infantry. It's it is actually the most decorated unit in the United States Army. It's still an active duty unit. We were the right of Jackson's line here. This is where the 7th Infantry got what is still used, their motto of cotton baler, because people talk about the cotton bale ramparts, and of course they didn't actually build the ramparts out of cotton bales because they were flammable, but because this is a swamp, they sunk cotton bales into the muck to give them stable footing. And if you look at the modern crest, it's still a cotton bale with 2 1808 bayonets crossed behind it. The right of Jackson's line against the river was the only point in the American line where the British penetrated at all because they built a redoubt in front of the line, and the 7th and Beale's New Orleans rifles plugged that gap.
How effective was this weapon?
This was actually not an effective weapon compared to what we have today. There were actually thousands of musket balls expended for every casualty because beyond 100 yards, you had no idea where they were going to go.
Did you see the spark?
No!
Then y'all would all be dead.
Yeah.
All right, so move out the way.
I was telling children about the gun and how the Harpers Ferry pistol was not of the period, but it closely resembled some of the best hardware America made in the early days of the Battle of New Orleans. It's important to learn about history because through history you get pride. And one of the greatest prides I have is holding this flintlock pistol here. Harpers Ferry, made in America, and it was one of the arms around the times that helped us defeat the British. It says 1814, and the battle raged on to 1815. And the Harpers Ferry pistol, beautiful gun. And I explained that to the kids that it's a piece of furniture, it's a piece of history, and also don't ever get in the front of it, okay? Don't ever get in the front of our 6-pounder over here either. You always want to be on this side.
I'm trying to portray the character Dominic Yu in history here at the Chalmette Battlefield. He was one of the cannoneers at this battlement during the battle, and along with John Lafitte and Pierre Lafitte, had the expert cannons to take down the British as they did. This is a blunderbuss here, and it's a preferred weapon by any seaman that would be getting attacked on the boat. You want something that could spray out. And this was like a little hand shotgun that sprayed out, and it's 102 caliber. And this piece here is about 200 years old. The sword that would be preferred on a boat would also be a short sword like this here, the saber. This is actually the same kind of saber that they would have back then. This is the exact same sword that John Lafitte carried on his person in New Orleans here. This is not a replica, this is a real thing.
Well, the role of the cannons was important in the Battle of 1812 because it kept the British from advancing onto the American lines without taking lots of losses. Well, this is a 6-pound cannon. It's got a typical carriage that you could tow with a pack animal. The cannons were something that the infantry would be very afraid of. They wouldn't want to advance on this rampart if it was manned with artillery crews. It would have been a very deadly proposition to run across this large field at cannon. We go through a lot of different safety procedures with the Park Service, but the first step is to search the piece with what we call a worm. We're going to make sure there's nothing in the barrel before we load it. Then we're going to sponge the barrel with a moist sponge to make sure that there's no burning embers from a previous firing. Then we can go ahead and load the cannon with actual black powder. We're going to prick it with a brass pick, put a primer in that hole that we just made with the pick, and then fire it off with the lint stock, which is a cotton rope that's soaked in a chemical that keeps it burning nice and slow. Fire it off with that, and then to go through those steps again, search the piece, make sure there's nothing remaining in the barrel, sponge it to put out the embers, then we'll be ready to go in 10 minutes.
How effective a weapon was the cannon during this battle?
Oh, it was extremely effective. Artillery is known as the queen of battle. You know, armies throughout history, after the invention of gunpowder, used artillery to great effect all over the world. You know, the Napoleonic Wars, American Revolution, Civil War certainly, the Battle of 1812. Artillery was critical for armies throughout history.
Why is it important that people learn this history, particularly young people?
I think if you're going to be a good citizen of the United States, you really need to pay attention and learn our history. So for one thing, you don't want to make the same mistakes, but you want to understand what happened in the past so you can understand what's going on today and why we're doing things. Things that happened even 200 years ago still affect decision makers today and relationships internationally. So, you know, it's absolutely critical that you know your history.
Women had an important role in the War of 1812. We would cook, clean, we would bear children, we would take care of our militia. Behind us, the women are cooking bacon. We were recently cooking eggs, but we finished that. Bacon is on the fire. We're starting a fire. The women would travel to New Orleans if they were not from the area. So the Tennessee militia or the Kentucky militia, the women would travel down here, stay in the city while the men were on the battlefield. Women and children should learn this history because it shows the way we developed our town. It shows the way women in general were seen, how children were seen. Children were seen as people who would cook and clean at any time at a drop of a pen, or how women would take care of their men. This is a really important role for us to portray to children and anyone who comes by to ask us questions.
It's important because this is what made America. It was one of the last battle the Americans fought against the British on American soil. So it's very important for just people to know their history and how we became who we are.
We're from Yonkers, New York. We came to the battlefield today to celebrate the anniversary of the battle. It's our first time here. I like it. I think it's a very nice display of patriotism and some of the techniques that soldiers in the War of 1812 used to survive and ultimately become victorious.
I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, and we came out here on the Creole Queen riverboat cruise, and we got dropped off here and we got to see some reenactment today of a famous battle that I was unaware even happened in history, so it's been great to see it.
What have you learned so far today?
Ooh, goodness. Just about the British colony and the French, and I mean all of it was intertwined, and it was just really interesting to hear about all of our different nations and how we came to be such a great American state.
We came out here with our homeschool group with our kids, but we come out here every year as a family because we live right across the highway, and we learn about what life was like in the Battle of 1812, but also about the actual battle itself.
What did the children gain from this?
I think they learn what culture was like before machines and the internet made everything. They learned how to build a fire without, using a lighter. They learned how to basically make art with ink that wasn't purchased from a store. They learned how to make goods before there were machines and corporations that made those goods for them.
I'm from Seattle, and we came out to the battlefield today to learn more about Andrew Jackson and this event.
What have you learned so far today?
That it's amazing that they won, and that there was a lot that went into the battle, and that it was really an incredible feat.
I'm from Atlanta. We came down for a weekend, and we heard that this was happening, so we came out to see some of the history.
What do you think so far?
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. People have put a lot of effort into it, and it's entertaining and it's educational.
What have you learned so far?
I've actually been here before, but I've learned some of the stuff that they went through, dressing up and the things that they had to carry. It's very interesting.
I'm from Brentwood, California. We came out to see the reenactment as much as we could.
What have you learned by coming out here today?
We took the riverboat, and so it's been very educational all the way down. We have our twin granddaughters with us who are 9, and so now the cannon just went off, and so I've been talking to these people, and I bless them for what the ancestors went through. We complain very easily by comparison what they have.
I'm from Duluth, Minnesota. We're just touring for a week here in New Orleans, trying to learn a little bit of the history. Took the riverboat cruise, and it was pretty cool. It's not so cold today, certainly a lot colder in Minnesota.
What do you think of what you've seen so far?
It's pretty good reenactment. We've seen a couple of, different, a bit of the history and the cultural change through that history, so we really enjoyed that. I think some of the actors here certainly know their history pretty well. They've done a pretty good job.
I brought my 3 children out here to enjoy the history of St. Bernard Parish, where we are from, and to maybe help them learn a little bit about the war.
What have you learned here today?
How hard it was for the soldiers and how much work they had to put into everything, and to be able to hear what was going on, to fire at the right time, and, work with their fellow soldiers.
What did the children learn?
That we have to get down behind the levee so that we don't get hit from the British.
We're here visiting from Australia. We came to visit New Orleans, and we came on this because we were keen to have a ride on the Mississippi, and we had some interest in the battle.
What do you think so far?
It's very impressive. We feel very fortunate we happened to be here on the anniversary day. We didn't know that was going to happen.
It's rather huge, and the enactment seems very proper and real. It's good. People are having fun.
What have you learned from coming out here today?
I knew nothing of the history of the American battles. So yeah, we've learned all of the history on the boat, and then coming here and reading some of the plaques. It's interesting.
I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I came out here with my children today because we have a love of U.S. history, and we're interested to see a lot of the reenactments taking place.
What have you learned here today?
So far, we've only just gotten here. We've watched the videos inside the visitor center, and it was quite interesting to see
the lack of casualties that occurred on the American side during the Battle of New Orleans, and the outlying factors that that basically caused a lot of the British to fail in their advances here.
I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona, and I came out here today for the Saints game, and we're here a day early, so we thought we'd take a visit.
What did you learn by coming out to the battlefield today?
I learned that there's a lot of history out here and that there's a lot that schools don't really teach us.
I'm from Madison, Mississippi, and what was neat today was being able to kind of see history come to life.
We think it's so very important for people all over the United States and people in our metropolitan area, people throughout Louisiana, to come and learn about the Battle of New Orleans. That battle was pivotal to the shaping of the United States as it is today. The battlefield is open daily. It's managed by the National Park Service. And here in St. Bernard Parish, we have many historic and cultural attractions to bring people to our parish, keep them here, and it's our pleasure to have them.
Welcome to St. Bernard Parish. Behind me are members of the Tourist Commission. My name is Gary Hittman, chair of that Tourist Commission. We are here to welcome you and to tell you all about our services that we offer here and attractions in St. Bernard Parish.
Give us an example of some of the things there are to see and do 12 months of the year.
Okay, we're home of the Battle of New Orleans, and we have fairs and festivals throughout the year, particularly during our peak festival seasons, which are spring and fall, and of course we have multiple Christmas events. We're one of the top destinations for red fishing. In fact, we're the capital of redfish in the United States. We produce more oysters than the rest of the United States. We're top producer for that. And we also concentrate on our marshland and coastal restoration.
How can people get more information about St. Bernard Parish?
More information is from coming to our visitor center. We're giving out information today at the Battle of New Orleans. And you can go on the website, visit St. Bernard.